Everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today's video is a conversation between myself and Matt Post from Mom and Grum. Now, if you haven't seen already, we created a documentary together not that long ago on making a canoe paddle with artwork on it. Now, part of this documentary, Matt and I had a conversation about creating art on this canoe paddle specifically. And I only used a few parts of this conversation. So this video is essentially just an extended version of our talk that we had together. And if you haven't watched the documentary, well, you can check it out on my channel. I'll link it down below for you as well. But otherwise, it's just two artists having a chit chat. So enjoy.
What I found fascinating was I asked you to scribble all the different colors on a piece of wood so I can do a test of different finishes, epoxy versus varnish and everything else I use to see if it would run. And you come back with a stick that has artwork on it that this is going in our house. And we did tests on it, and even putting epoxy on the test piece was nerve-wracking. So you look at your artwork, I think, as something that is either like naturally repeatable almost. You know what I mean? Like for you, yeah. This was something that it didn't mean it was a test piece that if it got ruined, it was okay. And to someone else, this is like, it's a piece of art. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I think it's like
this particular one, it was kind of a test. Ultimately, what I wanted to showcase in my mind when you said create a test piece, I wanted to create something that was essentially identical or very close to what a lot of my artwork is, that follows the same patterns. So I wanted to make sure that the trees were the same, like drawn the same way as I normally do. I wanted a couple different variations of stippling techniques in there, and of course the different colors. So I did the orange sun, the blue water, and the rocks as well. And I wanted to do that, and I did that intentionally to test to see if it actually is going to, if it's actually going to work well with the finish. And yeah, so that's kind of what I had when you asked me to scribble something. That was kind of immediately what I thought. Was just like, all right, well, I'm just gonna turn it into like a mini little illustration. And yeah, honestly, because it was just a scrap wood, a piece of wood that you just took out of your pile, right? So I mean, to me, if we put a finish on it, it completely bled all the ink and paint, it wouldn't have bothered me one bit.
Yet it sits here today as a piece of artwork that adorns our display of charcuterie boards and mugs, and will be on our kitchen mantle windowsill.
Yeah.
What do you classify your technique as? Because you use ink all combined in one image. So like that's not something common.
It's definitely a mixed media piece of artwork, as I do use archival ink as well as acrylic paint, especially with projects like this one that we did with the canoe paddle. Any large piece of artwork, whether it's on canvas or wood panels, as I commonly do, they're all a mixed media type of painting, I guess you could say, or illustration. I always struggle myself in terms of defining it, whether it's an illustration or a painting.
I think naturally illustrated matches your technique.
Yeah, exactly.
You say it that way.
And it all started off just archival ink pens. It was just drawing with pens, and so they were just illustrations, and it was all naturally naturally inspired by nature, which is where the naturally part of it comes from. Um, but yeah, it's kind of evolved over time, and adding in those elements of paint into the artwork.
Yeah.
Um,
I think your simple color choices
mm,
define you, and like you're recognizable based on your, not just your style but your color as well.
yeah, yeah, and that continues to evolve, just like how your paddles evolve over time, and how they've changed year after year. Same with my artwork. That's something that I've resonated quite strongly with your work, because I see that with my work all the time, how it keeps changing.
Growth. Yeah.
Like just this year, for example, is when I started introducing the white paint into the rocks and certain mountains and different illustrations. That was something that I thought of earlier this spring. It just ended up happening serpendipulously, I
It's
guess.
interesting because as a member of the public and a customer, when I see your artwork, and when I see your early artwork, and I see your artwork, your latest artwork, it all says Conrad.
Yeah.
It all says naturally illustrated, and it's it was defined from the very first
Mm-hmm.
image, um, and I never really focused in on the changes. Just
Yeah.
like when I point out my mistakes in a paddle to you, you don't see them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but if and you may not see them in my early paddles either, but you know it was mine just based on that
Right. Yeah.
stamp or the style, or you know, there's something about an artist, I think, that defines them, and
Mm-hmm.
that got them into that in the first place.
Yeah.
And your artwork is definitely, like, everyone knows it. I mean, not only just within the city, very recognizable in the city, um,
Yeah.
but branching outside of it, it's
Mm-hmm.
like
It's
beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. That means a lot. But yeah, it's definitely that's the power of the evolution of of the craft and the skill. Um, yeah, it's it's an evolution, so it's slow. It's a
Yeah,
slow process. So
yeah.
it's
But you don't want it to be fast. I don't.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I say the exact same thing. Like every drawing that I do, every creation that I make, there's something that gets tweaked, and to the majority of people, you won't notice it. It's just really small stuff. But over time, it kind of compounds and it changes. There are times, and I've had clients who will push my boundaries more,
Mhm.
and
Likewise.
and it's very interesting. You know, I've done some interesting pieces that are completely different. Well, not completely different, but different than what I do it now, how I do it now, and it's interesting how those elements usually take me a little bit more time to slowly add into
Yeah, because they're a
my normal
thought,
stuff.
not yet
Yeah,
a process.
yeah. So
Yeah,
it kind of is just sometimes you tease an idea and you try
yeah,
something very different. That is, if you put something side by side, you'll notice the differences right away. But I try not to extend that too often. I kind of just let the natural flow go into it, and yeah, just like adding in that white
yeah. I
paint into the pieces. That was just it wasn't the initial plan to do. It just was an afterthought, and or not an afterthought, but it was a thought during the process, and it was just like, let's take a chance and see what this will look like. And I ended up really liking it, and it's become a new trait going forward from there. So
Beautiful. I think what I see in our image is this that you created for us was, and in all of your artwork, is this wide vista, but you can zoom in on some intricate little details that make it personal.
yeah,
You did that for our own logo with a subtle little smile in the hippo's mouth. It's just a white sliver, to the veins in the leaf, in the maple leaf, and then
yeah,
you jump back You can look at it from far, and there's this vista of Lake Superior with this huge sunset, this big white sky, and huge open water
Mm-hmm.
with the mountains, and
Mm-hmm.
you know somehow you can capture all of that into every one of your images, whether it's a few inches up to a canoe paddle. So it's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. That means a lot for sure.
Um, Putting your art on a paddle, um, on my paddle. I know you've done paddles before, so not only how is it different from other media you work on, but um, what is it like working on mine? Is there room for improvement on what I do?
Mm.
Not only that, but yeah.
Well, working on your paddle was so amazing and special. Uh, it's very interesting because when I first started doing creating artwork on paddles, one of my very first initial inclinations was I would really like to work with somebody local that makes handcrafted paddles. And at the time, I didn't know who you were.
Yeah, yeah, we're
Um,
bad for that.
and I mean, this was many years ago now, before I even had my signature colors. I mean, I had my at that time the red and orange sun,
Yeah,
but other than that, it was just pretty much black and
but you
white.
had that natural reach back
Hmm.
then to paint on paddles.
Yeah, I
That's
had
cool.
initially. I mean, the first paddle I've ever done, I think, was for an athlete that was raising money to go to the Olympics
Beautiful.
back in 2019. And so, yeah, that was probably the first time I was challenged to do something like that. But from there, I ended up going and buying paddles, whether it was from Canadian Tire or from Great Lakes Outfitters, and just buying the paddles that I could afford
Yeah,
to work with,
it,
and
it felt like what you wanted to put
yeah,
your art on,
I think it was really unique, and it was definitely a different process because I had to take a finished paddle and
and
sand
remove
it
the
down
finish.
and
Yeah,
to be able to work on it, which
yeah,
which was a different side of the story.
yeah.
Um, but working with your paddle, it's by far the most beautiful paddle that I've probably worked on.
I appreciate that.
The the quality of the wood was just so amazing, and it was fine tuned for what I do. Like
Mm-hmm.
we selected this type of wood
Yeah,
specifically. It
yeah. It presented a unique challenge for me because um, I like to be able to show off the different qualities of the
Yeah,
woods that are available, and having everything the same wood,
yeah,
it was unique, right?
yeah, yeah.
And I hadn't done that before because I like to show like dark walnuts and curly
Hmm.
maple and
Yeah,
mix them all together. So um,
yeah.
yeah,
That was one thing that like, especially when I go shopping in the past when I went shopping for paddles, I had to look for paddles that were all like one or
yeah,
very even tone of wood,
yeah,
or else it throws off the illustration,
yeah, for sure.
because it is part of it. The wood is part of the
Yeah,
artwork, and so that was kind of the great part about working with you is we were able to get a really
collaborate.
beautiful light tone of wood,
Yeah,
and I love what it adds to the whole piece.
yeah. No,
Um,
I love how the sky in your image is just untreated wood,
yeah,
unpainted or uninked wood. And
exactly. Yeah.
it,
I think it adds to a lot of the character.
yeah,
That's why I like working on wood, whether it's
yeah.
wood panels
we
or
we haven't
panels.
we haven't shown it to many, but my mom saw it, and my mom's the artist we talked about, and she said, "Oh my God, he captured the essence of this area."
Hmm.
So you know, and her knowing my story, but seeing what you did on it is, and coming from an artist of her
Hmm.
quality to me
Yeah,
is
yeah,
satisfying. And
yeah. That was I I I know when we worked together, I didn't quite know yet what I was going to paint on it. I know you asked me a couple
I
times.
I loved that you didn't know
Yeah, I had no idea.
because
I
your approach mimicked mine so much, and that's why it was so difficult to talk about my process.
Yeah.
Because you don't know the process. Every paddle has its own process. Sometimes you, I can babble right now, but
No, you're exactly right. Everything has its own process, but yeah, I didn't really know exactly what was gonna come out of it. I didn't have a composition in mind at all. Um, I think the night before I went and did the actual painting of it, I had this idea that came into my mind that I needed to put a canoe in the piece.
yeah,
So that idea came through, and that was like a major part of it. So I already had kind of a jumping off point. And when I first got into my studio and before I started doing anything, I did a rough sketch because initially my idea was just to do a smaller inland lake. I was going to kind of draw inspiration from Lake Michigammon, one of my favorite spots to go canoeing in our area, because it's just so beautiful, and I have a lot of reference photos from it. But I did that in the initial rough sketch that I did on paper. But as soon as I got onto the paddle, I I don't know what it was, but initially I started drawing out the mountains, and immediately I was like, nope, this is going to be a Lake Superior theme. And so I left the horizon going out, and I think it worked perfectly because that's where where the shaft comes in, and it's a little curve.
We noticed a couple things you followed in the wood.
And so it made sense. And especially like on the flip side, we have your new logo, which has the outline of Lake Superior. I was like, for the first paddle, I think a Lake Superior piece is necessary. Like it just worked out, and it worked out naturally.
It just had to feel right.
It flowed into it.
Yeah, naturally illustrated, right?
Exactly. So it was just perfect. It felt perfect, and it was amazing to see that come together. And yeah, I loved that part of it. And I was so pumped while I was drawing it. I was like, once I finished
that's how I felt when I was building it.
The pencil sketch, I was like, yes, this is the design. I'm really happy with it, and everything else just kind of flowed together. Yeah, the only what other thing has just escaped my mind, but yeah, essentially that's kind of how that design came about.
We did notice that the canoe is a 16-foot prospector, is it not?
Yes, it is a 16-footer, probably. It is a red canoe, and
well,
I think the red canoe.
That says to me.
Oh yes, I did put 16. I forgot that I did that. The little details I
saw that, and then I looked at the back seat and stuff, and the writing on the side, and I looked over at this canoe, and I'm like, did he? Yeah. But this is your canoe, probably. But mine, it just so happens there's one sitting here too.
I mean, mine originally was a burgundy red, so not the classic red. Red canoe that we have here, but I think everything went through. But yeah, I mean, I've paddled on Lake Superior myself. On rather calm days, I've had some exceptional luck. And it's taken me to some incredible beaches and spots. So yeah, I think that's what's just so amazing. There's a lot of connection, I think, between everything, all of the elements. The fact that this wood is sourced locally from the Algoma region. This is a paddle for this area.
From the Algoma region and from a local supplier.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that it all connects together, and the connections that you have to Lake Superior, that your business has to Lake Superior, to the region, as well as myself. A lot of my artwork is inspired by Lake Superior. And,
Well, it's truly recognizable as Lake Superior Natural Illustrated, and I definitely appreciate that we got to be collaborate together on this. And look forward to continuing.
yeah, I
Sure.
think now that we've done this one,
Yeah.
we've got, I think both of us have a fair bit of ideas of what we want to
I may challenge
achieve.
you on the top half of the blade into maybe a little bit of contrasting colors. We'll see.
Yeah, who knows?
I do
We'll see
love.
what we'll
I
do.
absolutely love that you curled the image around the edge of the blade. I think if you hadn't done that, it would not be the same.
Yeah,
I don't know how it's an extra little kick that you could have ended it at the image. It's going to hang on a wall or be used, but having that edge with your artwork in the same detail, on a 1/8 inch thick section.
Yeah, it was a little.
I could imagine there's nothing to rest your hand on. How you would have held this to do what you do, and the fineness of the stippling on there.
Yeah, I love going over the edge. I think going over the edges gives it a lot of character.
Depth. Thickness.
It's a little thing, like you said. It's not going to be noticed right off the bat.
It was the first thing I noticed. The very first thing I noticed.
In general, if it's hanging on the wall, the way it was revealed to you, obviously you're seeing it kind of from the bottom up, but
because for me it was the wood continues on the top section of the blade, obviously, to have the image continue on the bottom section, just seemed to pull it all together.
I think it would just feel weird if it would just cut off without anything. Ultimately, the only other thing that I think that I might have done if I didn't move the image under was to just do a black line, but I think that would probably get lost because then it would have to end somewhere, and there's just no natural end point. Whereas this
gave it one.
This naturally ends it perfectly. So,
beautiful job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, because you see the accuracy of the eye. So when you look at these sections here of the throat that come down, they need to meet each other, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
That looks
but
bullseye.
You see, straight. Yeah. So this point and this point have to line up. Not only for looks, but for strength. You don't want the throat a little bit short on one side, because I've done that. I've made those mistakes that when I finished a paddle and you look at it, I'm like, oh, it didn't continue it down quite as far. And this piece here, where it ends, the blade section, when you flip it around, this one here has to be
identical.
And it's not. But those are things that you like. Your eye knows those as soon as you see it. But I love the friggin'.
Yeah, it looks amazing.
Oh, it was